Hi, good morning.
Hi,
Hey,
happy 2025.
this is 2025 already. My goodness.
Already,
Wow.
yes, and we're ready.
Happy New Year to you.
Yes,
But when you watch this, it may not be the new year.
yes, could be 20 years hence.
Yes.
What should we talk about today?
We've got more good stuff.
More good stuff.
We're on our
In our-
46th session, which is very
Oh,
cool.
yes, 46 already.
Yes.
46.
And we're recording this on January 3rd, so it is a brand new year when we're recording it.
All right. In our last session, we mentioned the mansion that Hume lived in on Jacko Hill in Shimla. And
Jacko doesn't sound like it's an Indian name.
it's actually Jakku.
Okay.
And the English obviously pronounce things in their own way. And sometimes the Indian people would pick up the anglicized version.
Okay.
So they would pronounce it the same way. And they, at least the Mahatmas, were calling it Jacko Hill, probably because the Englishmen were calling it that. But it was the highest point in Shimla. I did a little research and found that our very good friend, Janet Kirshner, who is the archivist for the Theosophical Society in America, wrote an article about Rothney Castle, and it's on theosophical.wiki. So we will put a link to that. She also let us know that she has linked on theosophical.wiki to our series on the Mahatma letters. So it is now on the official theosophical.wiki page for those who want to study the Mahatma letters. So in researching his mansion, which he called Rothney Castle, it wasn't a castle.
And do we know what Rothney is? Is it a name of...
It was
Somebody.
apparently a castle in England at one time, but there's
Okay.
not even much about it. Apparently, according to Janet, people from England who built big buildings would sometimes name them after a famous building in the UK. So it may have been named after a building in the UK, but I couldn't find the original. Apparently, too, there are very few photos of the mansion as it used to look. Unfortunately, in 2025, it's in bad disrepair. Whoever bought it after its heyday did not maintain it, and it's not in good condition at all. But I did find a few photos of when it was in better condition. The outside is very hard to find a photo of. The best I could find was a commemorative stamp that was issued in India in 2013. And we'll put a better photo online. But as you can see in the photo, it's 3 stories. There is kind of a turret at one point, but there were numerous rooms. I have no idea how many rooms or the extent of what they were. But just to look at it, I would guess that it would be somewhere in the realm of about 15,000 square feet. I don't think that would be too far off base for the size of the place. According to Janet's research, Hume built it, and it was finished apparently in about 1880. So it was brand new at the time of the Mahatma letters, and he was quite anxious to show it off, as you can well imagine. And as Paul pointed out, several of the early phenomena occurred at this mansion. In fact, recent letters that have been delivered were delivered at the very mansion. The most prominent part from the outside is the conservatory, which was magnificent. And that's one of the few areas of the house that apparently is still in good condition. Here we have, and this is from Google Maps. We have a few photos of the house in present time and not too long in the past. This is the entrance to it. It was on a tall hill and it was difficult to get to. You had to park down outside the gates and then walk up to it. And then one of the first things you see is the conservatory, which stretched all along one side of the house. It was quite large. So you can see how magnificent that conservatory was.
It looks like a greenhouse almost, but it's glass ceiling, so the light can come in for the plants. It's designed to have plant life.
And it's very typical Victorian higher class. They loved having their greenhouse or conservatory, as they often called it, because they could grow tropical plants in it. Now, they were in India, which was tropical, but Hume's Rothney Castle was at 8,000 feet.
Oh, that's very high, actually.
Very high, like hard to breathe type
Right.
atmosphere. So in the wintertime, obviously, they always had snow. And trying to get up that hill, I can only imagine. Anyway, the conservatory is where several of the letters were left. And remember in our last session, KH said that DK had tried to penetrate Rothney Castle to leave letters or to pick up letters, but was unable to because he was on the verge of passing another initiation, and the atmosphere was such that he couldn't do it. And so KH told him to give up that idea because it might cause him to fail his initiation. Here are a couple of photos that our good friend Michael Gomes took when he was there several years ago. One is the outside here, and you can see the turret here. And then one view, a different view of the conservatory. So these two photos are on theosophical.wiki. And then the only other photos I found that are really of interest are a few interior ones. And these are on Google Maps, so you can see a better version of them there.
We don't know who took these, right?
No, somebody took them and posted them. Anybody can post photos to Google Maps of any area. So especially interesting are three here. And there are more than that. There is one of the bedrooms.
Well, that begs the question. Maybe it was open to the public as a tourist.
At one time it was.
Okay, that makes sense. All right.
And this was obviously taken during that time. The dining room, which was quite magnificent, and a sitting room. There were several sitting rooms, apparently, of different sorts.
Not many floor plans these days have sitting rooms.
No. Parlor, sitting room, drawing room. They had many different names for them. So apparently Hume paid the equivalent in US dollars in 1880 of about $250,000 to build this. But then he kept adding on to it.
That's not
How
very
much is $250,000 in? I looked.
Oh, is that adjusted for inflation? Oh, that's not
adjusted for inflation.
Okay.
This was in that time.
Okay.
So yeah, about $7.7 million today.
Okay. Wow.
So that would build a mansion for you even today.
Oh yeah. Wow.
So we get a little better insight of his house
Wow.
and why Sinnett felt a little intimidated by Hume. Not only that, it was his personality as well.
And what was Sinnett's house like?
As far as I have been able to find, Sinnett never owned his own house. He always rented. And he lamented in his later years that he hadn't purchased real estate when he had the opportunity to. He made some very bad business decisions in his life. We'll talk more about that later. But yeah, he was intimidated by Hume. We finished up in our last session on a long letter about Fern, the little double-dealing monkey Fern. But they were hopeful that he would be able to overcome the defects that he had because he was very clairvoyant. They were able to communicate very easily with him. And if he had been able to overcome those defects, he would have been a very good successor to HPB, who was really anxious to retire at this point. But we'll see what happened. Obviously, he didn't succeed, but we'll go into details later. Now we're on another letter, number 76. And this is a letter where we have both the questions that Sinnett asked and the responses, because KH replied on the same letter and sent it back to him. So I'm going to read Sinnett's portion of this letter, and then Paul can read KH's responses and his interjections. This was received in Shimla in August 1882. And remember once again that every summer the Sinnetts would move to Shimla for the hot season because most of Shimla was 7,000 feet. Only Hume's castle was at 8,000 feet.
Where in the country is that approximately again? Is it?
It's far north. It's at the foothills of the Himalayas and kind of south of Bhutan, Nepal area. So August 12th was when Sinnett wrote the letter. We don't know when he got it back, but in the same month. My dear guardian, I am afraid the present letters on theosophy are not worth much, for I have worked on too literal an acceptance of some passages in your long letter about Devachan. Remember, both he and Hume were writing articles and a couple of letters that Sinnett was planning to have published in Light in London. The bearing of that seemed to be that the accidents as well as the suicides were in danger from the attraction of the seance room. You wrote, but there is another kind of spirit we have lost sight of, the suicides and those killed by accidents. Both kinds can communicate, and both have to pay dearly for such visits.
And then KH comments, correct. Can we make a quick note, though? We're jumping back several letters and sessions back and forth on communicating with spirit.
And it's only because both of them took the original Devachan letter, which was number 68, and they're writing articles because this was brand new information. And they were anxious to share that with the world and specifically with the spiritualists. So there are a few letters back and forth pertaining to the same subject. This won't be the last time we hear about it. And then Sinnett continues in his letter. And later on, after speaking of the case of the suicides in detail, you say, as to the victims of accident, these fare still worse. And then he's just putting in little bits of quotes. Unhappy shades, cut off in the full flesh of earthly passions. They are the pisachas, etc. They not only ruin their victims, and so on.
Again, correct. Bear in mind that the exceptions enforce the rule.
And if they are neither very good nor very bad, the victims of accident or violence derive a new set of skandhas from the medium who attracts them.
I have explained the situation on the margin of proofs. See my note.
And then I assume this is the note.
Before we do that, this is interesting. We may have discussed it before, but the victims of accident or violence derive a new set of skandhas, which are kind of proclivities and traits from the medium who attracts them.
And that's what he was pointing out. If they're left alone, everything is fine. But if a medium is compelled to try to communicate with them, they say, ooh, an opportunity to interact with someone in a physical body, and they might be attracted to that.
Now, I'm curious, I'm sure the question will be answered, but do these skandhas carry over into this spirit's next incarnation?
The answer is yes, they do.
And that is no bueno.
No.
That is not at all. Like, wow.
Because as we pointed out, and the Mahatma pointed it out before, normally after a person dies, there is no new karma created. It is simply a resolution of energy from then until the next incarnation. But when these mediums come along and stir things up, that's when everything gets out of
That's a
sync.
good analogy, stirring things up and adding new spices and different flavors that the person who's dead didn't have. And now they have all this new stuff to deal with.
More often than not, they're worse off than before.
KH continues with his exposition here. On the margin, I said rarely, but I did not use the word never. Accidents occur under the most various circumstances, and men are not only killed accidentally or die as suicides, but are also murdered, something we have not even touched upon.
And not only murdered, but in wars. So these are two areas that haven't even been covered at all.
I would have assumed that violent deaths relate to murder.
And that is the case, violent death.
I can well understand your perplexity, but can hardly help you. Bear always in mind that there are exceptions to every rule. Well, that's interesting. There are exceptions to every rule.
And read the rest of it.
And exceptions to these again, and other side exceptions. That sounds like something you would say, actually.
Yes.
So always be prepared to learn something new. That's definitely something you would say.
Exactly. So once again, the Englishman wanted, give us something that we know it and we don't have to revisit it.
That's like
and
me.
he's saying life doesn't work that way. Look around you. Tell me all of the different scenarios that happen in life. Mm-hmm. There are just as many scenarios after death than there are while a person is alive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I can easily understand why we are accused of contradictions and inconsistencies. Even to writing one thing today and denying it tomorrow. I'm glad he's admitting that, because they do that.
Yeah, they do.
What you were taught is the rule.
In all caps.
Mm-hmm. Those who are good and pure and die by accident sleep in the Akasha, ignorant of their change, meaning they don't know they're dead.
Right.
The very wicked and impure suffer all the tortures of a horrible nightmare. For the majority, neither very good nor very bad, whether the victims of accident or violence, including murder, some sleep, others become pisachas, which are like ghosts, right?
Right.
And while a small minority may fall victim to mediums, wow, and derive a new set of skandhas from the medium who attracts them, small as their number may be, their fate is to be the most deplored. Oh my gosh. That's really unfortunate. The people who were neither great humans nor evil humans, their fate is to be the most deplored.
Yes, because nothing good can occur because of their interaction with a medium.
Wow.
And as we pointed out, this almost never happens today. Spiritualism was in its heyday in 1882.
There are probably some people in the world who are contacting spirits.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
But not as frequently. What I said in my notes on your manuscript was in reply to Mr. Hume's statistical calculations, which led him to infer that there were more spirits than shells in the seance rooms in such a case.
And that was one of Hume's letters soon after the Devachan letter, where he set out to prove to KH that, based on his own words, there were going to be plenty of spirits, meaning the actual person being able to communicate with a medium. And KH said, no, you're wrong.
We've said many times that is, I guess we can use the word never here. That's never the case. Mediums do not contact the actual person. It's the shell of the person.
It was on this text that I have been working. If this is not the case, or perhaps there is something I don't understand, the words have a different meaning from that which seems to belong to them. And it might be better to cancel these two letters altogether or wait for a complete revision. The warning is too solemn, and it appears we are dividing suicides only into the very pure and elevated on one side and the average people on the other. It seems to me that it would hardly do to let even letter number 1 stand alone, though it does not include the mistake, for then there would be no reason for it unless it's followed up by letter 2. Both letters have gone to London to Stainton Moses for publication in Light, the first by the mail on July 21st, the second by the last mail yesterday. Now, if you decide that it is better to cancel them, I shall just be in time to telegraph home to Stainton Moses to that effect, and will do this as soon as I receive a telegram from you or the old lady to that effect. If nothing is done, they will appear in Light as written in the most recent manuscript, though I see my wife made a few little mistakes in copying it. So he was needing a reply ASAP because the first letter would have been arriving any day now, and he wanted to be able to intercept it by sending a telegram if he was completely off base. It is altogether a very awkward tangle. Apparently, I was hasty in sending them home, but I thought I had followed the statements of your long Davidson letter so faithfully. Awaiting orders, your ever devoted APS.
You have much to learn, and we have much to teach, and we won't refuse to go to the very end. Yes. But we really must beg that you not jump at hasty conclusions. I do not blame you, my dear faithful friend. I would rather blame myself were anyone here to be blamed. But our respective modes of thought and habits are so diametrically opposed to each other. Accustomed as we are to teaching chelas who know enough to find themselves beyond the necessity of ifs and buts during the lessons, I am too apt to forget that I am doing the work with you that is generally entrusted to these chelas. Henceforth, I will take more time when answering your questions. More time, wow.
Well, he keeps mentioning that his time comes in bits and pieces. He's got to take care of who knows how many different chelas. Mm-hmm. And yet he's devoting an enormous amount of time to these two guys because the 7-year trial period is almost up and they don't have much to show for it. They've got several branches. We discovered a few months previous, there were about 75 branches, and that was thanks to Janet Kirshner again for that information. But these branches would be established and then they would go dormant. And they were awaiting more information. They needed something besides just Isis Unveiled and Sinnett's first book, The Occult World, in order to move forward. They had a few articles in the Theosophist that were coming out every month, so that was very helpful, but they still didn't have a lot of information for teaching.
Your letters to London can do no harm, and are sure, on the contrary, to do good. They are admirably written, and the exceptions may be mentioned and the whole ground covered in one of the future letters.
This is a good time to point out, too, what he said previously, KH, that normally they entrust the training to their higher chelas, like DK, Subbarao. Those were the ones who normally interacted with the chelas that were just starting out. The Mahatmas normally didn't do that themselves, but because this was a special project, KH was taking this on personally. and devoting a lot of time and effort to it. But he's saying that now he's going to have to devote even more time to it because apparently they're not catching on to it.
I have no objection to your making extracts for Colonel Chesney, except one. He is not a theosophist, so be careful and do not forget your details and exceptions whenever you explain your rules.
Remember that Colonel Chesney was the military officer that Sinnett was trying to impress by his knowledge of theosophy and was trying to convert him to become a theosophist. And Colonel Chesney actually received a portrait phenomenally produced by DK. He was enormously proud of it. And so he's saying, regarding his letters, I don't have any objection to your making copies of them, but be very careful because he could misunderstand them.
Remember, too, even in the case of suicides, there are many who will never allow themselves to be drawn into the vortex of mediumship, and please do not accuse me of inconsistency or contradiction when we come to that point. If you only knew how I write my letters and the little time I am enabled to give to them, perchance you would feel less critical if I'm not exactly accurate. Wow. Now, how do you like Djwal Khul's idea and art? I haven't caught a glimpse of Shimla for the last 10 days. Affectionately yours, K.H.
I don't know what he means by the idea, but the art, of course, is the drawing produced phenomenally of KH.
Well, maybe DK's idea was to send... No, he was asked to. He didn't have the idea to send it phenomenally.
One of his ideas was that he asked the Chauhan, oh, can I deliver it phenomenally to them in Shimla?
That might be the idea.
And he said no.
Oh.
No, absolutely not. It was delivered phenomenally to one of the chelas in Shimla, apparently, and then delivered in the normal way to Colonel Chesney. But just the fact that there are 3 portraits, because Sinnett had 2 portraits of KH that had been produced by HPB, and now Colonel Chesney has a 3rd copy. Now we're at letter number 77, again received in August at Shimla. And this is just a letter to Sinnett.
This is a short letter from KH to Sinnett. My dear friend, I feel very down mentally with this never-ending opposition and continual attacks on our strongholds. What specifically is he referring to there?
He's referring to Hume, who's just hell-bent on forcing them to teach him how to do phenomena. And he's assailing them in several different ways, trying to figure out a weak point where he can force their hand.
In my entire quiet, contemplative life, I have never met a man more tenacious and unreasonable than Hume. I cannot go on like this, passing my life in useless protest. And if you can't influence him with your friendly manner, we will have to part company in the not-too-distant future. Wow. I was with the Chauhan when I received the letter I now enclose, and he was perfectly disgusted, called the whole thing the Tibetan name for comedy.
And I assume that's Tamacha.
It is not that he is anxious to do good or help the progress of the TS. It is simply insatiable pride in him, a ferocious, intense desire to feel and show others that he is the elect, that he knows things which others barely suspect.
And this is, remember, what Hume kept insisting in his letters time after time. Oh, I don't want them for any personal reason. I just want those in order to help people. And the master's like, yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm. Don't bother to protest because it's useless. We know, and you do not.
Yes, they do know.
The other day, the Chauhan heard his idiotic, painful, but sincere lamentations of his wife and took note of it.
And this is his wife, Moggy, who has serious health problems. Not only is she alcoholic, but she's got something else going on. And I believe it was tuberculosis, if I'm not mistaken.
This is not a man who aims to become a perfect soul, and he who would write of a brother theosophist what he has written to me of Fern is no theosophist. Let this be strictly private, and don't tell him anything except what he will read in my letter. I want you to read the 2 letters before you take them to him, and I beg you to be present when he reads them.
Now, we don't have those 2 letters, unfortunately, because they apparently did get delivered. But it's interesting that KH wanted Sinnott to be present when Hume read the letter. We'll see what the result is, but we don't know what the letter said.
I will see what can be done for Colonel Chesney, and I believe Joel Cool is after him. For the first time during my life, I think I feel really disheartened. Yet, for the sake of the society, I don't want to lose him. Well, I will do all I can, but I'm seriously afraid that he's going to spoil things someday. Yours with sincere affection, KH. This is really interesting that he's showing these kinds of feelings.
Yeah. And KH is the eternal optimist. He's always cheerful, always has a positive attitude, but Hume is wearing him down. The rest of the Mahatmas don't seem to be as affected by it as much as KH, but he has really taken this to heart and devoted his time and effort to trying to save Hume from himself. And yet Hume is insistent that things are going to be his way or he's going to hit the highway. Now we have another short letter, letter number 78. This one was received on August 22nd at Shimla.
Private. My good friend, remember that in the phenomenon intended for Colonel Chesney, the only real phenomenal thing, or rather act of occultism, is the best of the 2 productions of Joel Cool of the likeness of your humble servant. I am sorry to say for you.
And I think what he means by that is that the one that Colonel Chesney got was actually the better of the portraits.
The rest of the performance is, notwithstanding its mysterious character, something only too natural, and of which I do not at all approve. But I have no right to go against the traditional policy, however much I would like to avoid its practical application. Don't know what he's talking about there.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Keep this strictly within your own friendly heart until the day comes to let several persons know that you were warned of it. I dare not say more. The probations are hard all around and are sure not to meet your European notions of truthfulness and sincerity. But reluctant as I feel to use such means, or even to permit them to be used in connection with my chelas, still I must say that the deception, the lack of good faith, and the traps intended to involve the brothers have multiplied so much lately, and there is so little time left before that day that will decide the selection of the chelas, that I can't help thinking that our chiefs, and especially Moria, may be right after all. He probably means right in the sense that this whole experiment wasn't going to work anyway.
Most likely, yes. He's really trying to save it.
With an enemy, one has to use either equal or better weapons. But do not be deceived by appearance. Were that so, I could be as frank with Mr. Hume, whom I sincerely respect for some of his genuine sterling qualities, yet I cannot help blaming him for others. When will any of you understand what we really are, instead of indulging in a world of fantasy?
I am quite certain that they know far better than the Europeans whether or not they would be impressed with that. They're a little reluctant too, because these guys are so judgmental, especially Hume. So even if they did that,
It would be like selling their soul to the devil.
that's exactly what it would be like. It would be like opening up themselves completely and then being shot down.
That's
So-
what the Dugpas would do. They would do that.
Exactly. Yeah.
In case Colonel Chesney speaks to you of certain things, tell him to not trust appearances. He is a gentleman and ought not to be allowed to labor under a deception never meant for him, but only as a test for those who would impose themselves upon us with an unclean heart. The crisis is near at hand. Who will win the day? KH.
So a lot is going on here. Hume is really making it difficult because not only is he attacking them from several different positions and trying to weaken them, but he's infecting Fern with the same attitude and infecting other people as well. Now he's starting to badmouth the Mahatmas because they're not kowtowing to his demands, and that's an attack on his ego. Letter number 79, received at Shimla, August 1882.
My dear friend, I am tired and disgusted to death with all this wrangling. Please read this before giving it to Mr. Hume. If, as a debt of gratitude, he would exact only a pound of flesh, I would have nothing to say, but a pound of useless verbiage is more than even I can stand. Yours ever, K.H. That's the shortest letter in the whole book.
Just about. So what he's referring to is Shakespeare. He knows.
Pound of flesh?
Yeah, a pound of flesh. I believe it's the Merchant of Venice. And he said if he only wanted a pound of flesh, I would say nothing, but a pound of useless verbiage is more than I can stand.
Wow.
Now, we have another short letter. Mm-hmm. This one, at least, is more interesting and not on the same topic of the other ones.
Letter number 80, received at Shimla, early autumn 1882. This is a fraudulent intrusion into private correspondence.
And I'm not sure what he's referring to there, but
wow,
we'll leave it at that.
No time to even answer your queries. We'll do so tomorrow or next day. For several days, I have noticed something like anxiety in your lady's thoughts about Den.
And Den, the Senate's young child, would have been about 5 at this point.
Children's diseases are seldom dangerous, even when somewhat neglected. If the child has naturally a strong constitution, the pampered ones falling naturally victims to contagion. I remarked her fear of carrying the germs of the disease home with her at Mr. Hume's the other day, as my attention was drawn to her by the disinherited, who was on watch.
So, DK was on watch, and they mentioned this many different times. They call it on watch. Obviously, there is one Mahatma or one Chela, at least, that has to be on watch for any of the Chelas that are in the outer world, because they're not in the ashram under protection. So HPB, especially when she was asleep, was watched by someone. Countess Wachtmeister, who we will hear about later, said in a book that she wrote that one evening HPB had fallen asleep. And so she went over to where her bed was and turned down the lamp. And she said no sooner did she turn it down than it went back up again. So she turned it down again, and then she saw a brown hand that was turning it up. And obviously that was whoever was on watch and wanted light in the room.
Oh my gosh.
So interesting stories. And he said, I remarked her fear of carrying the germs of the disease, and it was whatever disease Mrs. Hume had, and I'll double check, but I believe it was tuberculosis.
Fear not in any case. I hope you will pardon me if I advise you to sew up the enclosed in a small bag. A part of it will do, and hang it on the child's neck. Oh, I remember this story. You've told me this story before.
Yeah.
Unable as I am to carry into your homestead the full magnetism of my physical presence, I do the next best thing by sending you a lock of hair as a vehicle for the transmission of my aura in a concentrated condition.
Isn't
this is
that
amazing.
interesting?
If only we have that. I wonder
Yeah,
where that-
exactly.
I wonder if this would exist in Sinnott's family heirloom somewhere.
No one knows.
Do not allow anyone to handle it except Mrs. Sinnott. You'll do well not to approach Mr. Fern too near for a time. Yours, K.H. Say nothing of this note to anybody.
So it's very important that no one else get hold of this.
Right, they'll contaminate it.
Well, not just that, but it's a direct contact to KH. Another bit of information that often gets missed.
I wonder how high up the chain he had to go for permission to do that.
We can only guess. He might have been able to do it himself. He might have had to go to Moria. He might have had to ask the Chohan. He doesn't say.
So the locket was in this letter, in the envelope, most likely.
The hair was.
The hair, right. The hair.
He said, sew this up in a little pouch and hang it on his neck so that it's right near his chest at all times.
However this letter was transmitted, the hair was in the envelope.
Right.
Maybe.
And I don't know if Sinnott himself received another sample of hair later, because he said a portion of it will do. So it may be that he divided that one and that Den had part of it and that Sinnott had part of it. So remember in a previous letter, he had sent another lock of hair to Mrs. Sinnott because she was experiencing some health problems when she got back from London. And he told her to wear it in an armband at just about here on the left arm. In Denny's case, he said wear it near the chest, which would make sense if she was afraid of tuberculosis.
Wow.
So very, very interesting little tidbits that we get here.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Our session today is a little bit short for a couple of reasons. One is that we have to record another short video for another application. And one thing is, you're going on a very long voyage.
I am going on a voyage. Yes. In 3 days from now, I'll be getting on a plane heading across the globe to Russia with Natalia and her son, and we'll be seeing her family for a couple of weeks.
And to what part of Russia is that?
Our first destination is very high in the Arctic Circle, a town called Murmansk, which is a port town in the Arctic Circle, very high. It's near the border of Norway. Norway actually touches Russia in that area.
And this is very prominent in the movie Hunt
Yes.
for Red October.
And we'll spend a couple of days a little bit south in St. Petersburg, then much farther south in Moscow, and then back up. We'll retrace our path to make the journey home. It includes several airplanes, a bus even, since it's challenging to get into Russia these days, London, Oslo, Kirkenes, both in Norway, and then a bus across the border from Kirkenes, Norway, into Russia, to Murmansk.
Exciting stuff.
Yes.
So you'll have some stories to tell, right?
Oh, goodness, yes. Yes. I'm very excited to travel and have this adventure.
All right. So we won't let you down, though. We have a few sessions that are still in post-production, so they will still get released in between. He will be back 2 weeks from now. And we will hopefully see you in session number 47.